Lord of Jews and Gentiles. This sounds well with Christians today, but as heresy for those that believe to be the chosen ones. It was a huge challenge for the disciples and the early church.
But was that foreseeably possible, Jesus, to be the Lord of the Jews and the Gentiles, when the Jews were really hating the Gentiles, and those that were hated, the Gentiles, really worship completely different gods?
The lesson begins with a very interesting story. Jesus refuses to help a woman who is crying for him to help her demon-possessed daughter that is suffering terribly. He says, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of Israel." We are going to get back to this story near the end of the lesson, but it does show some controversy.
Let's see first if Jesus was the Lord of the Jews. First and foremost, they felt his compassionate and caring hand. According to John Pauline, quoted in the lesson, when Jesus fed the 5,000 men and many more women and children, it reminded the Jewish people of the manna that God provided in the wilderness. They almost felt that the long-awaited Messiah was coming back to take care of them and tender for their needs, just like a father does. They were not mistaken when they felt like that. It was an intimate feeling of security and closeness.
We're basically looking through chapters 14 and 15 of Matthew this week, following the stories that are depicted. It must have been such a roller coaster for the people around Jesus. Wow, maybe he's the Messiah finally coming. But then John the Baptist gets decapitated. If he is the one, why did he allow this to happen? And then this feeding of the multitudes with the association with the manna, and that he is going to take care of all their needs. But Jesus is just beginning the teaching, and he doesn't want to leave his disciples with these thoughts in mind, so he sends them away, saying that he will catch up to them later.
Yeah. And Matthew's intention to address his message and his gospel to the Jews continue with him openly disclosing Jesus as something much more, much bigger than being a caregiver. "It is I, do not be afraid," said Jesus in the stormy night, and commands the winds to stop. How amazing this should have been, and how close to the image of the Jehovah, the Creator, the Sustainer, and the all-powerful. Again, Matthew is spot on who Jesus is. Don't you recognize him, fellow Jews?
Breaking prejudices, preformed expectations, it takes time and experience. In his experience, Peter cried, "Lord, save me!" It took the mind longer, but the heart recognized Jesus as Lord.
And the lesson makes a little detour in between the topic of the Jews and Gentiles, and Matthew speaks about hypocrisy, a common disease of the human heart. But why is Jesus so much emotionally disturbed by that? Simply because it's a different way of worship, different way of relationship. Worship with the lips, with the outward appearance, but not with the heart. And for those of us very much familiar with the law, Adventists, it's a danger to the power of two.
I don't think that it's a detour though. The story is about the Pharisees coming to Jesus and basically challenging the perception that he is the Lord. He can't be. His disciples are breaking the law by not washing their hands. This story shows how deep the issue is. What are our expectations from the Messiah? What do we expect? Maybe we have put ourselves in the position of judging instead of being open to learn. Jesus was explaining what are the things that really makes us unclean. He tried to open their minds to look deeper into the issues and not just the traditions. This is what makes the Lord different than any pagan idol or God. He is real and not superstition. So, the Jews were seeing prophecies and signs that Jesus is the Lord. They felt the need for him, but for many, it wasn't what they expected.
And that's okay. Jesus was successfully connecting with the Jews. But the question is, what about the Gentiles? Here comes a Canaanite woman whose daughter is demon-possessed and suffering greatly. Matthew will report two small details that make all the difference of how Jesus relates to that woman, but also recognizes the issues that the Jews had with the Gentiles. The woman first is pushed away by Jesus in his reference to her as to a dog. And secondly, she calls him the son of David, which categorizes him as one who is foreign to her ancestors, but recognizing his Jewish descent.
It's an amazing story. I mean, Jesus came as Jew for the Jews, but most of them said, "You're not what we expected." And then many of the Gentiles, they said, "Oh, but we need you."
Although Matthew portrays and sees Jesus as a Jew in blood and in character, he insists on acknowledging that Jesus, at the end of it, has helped this pagan woman. Furthermore, Jesus will repeat the miracle of feeding the masses, this time 4,000 men, and in the land of the Gentiles. Jesus felt the same compassion for them as for the Jews. And I would assume that the disciples were shocked and puzzled, and who wouldn't have been? It was a time of patriotism and chauvinism. But Jesus was on a mission to save, and it included everybody.
God's plan was to develop a relationship with Israel so the world can see and learn more about Him, to be a light for the Gentiles, and also to provide a way for the Messiah to come. We are all in His heart, but for some weird reasons, we tend to forget it or ignore it very often. It's fascinating to look through the stories in the Gospel and admire how Jesus is dealing with all these peculiarities.
Lord of Jews and Gentiles, but is He my Lord?